It's the state of the dungeon! It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the State of the Dungeon address for the final session of the extended Tyranny of Dragons story. This game started back in May 9th, 2019 and finished in November of 2020. So, good year and a half story path. We started out in the Lost Mines of Phandelver from the starter set. After we finished that, we broke into the Horde of the Dragon Queen and finished at Rise of Tiamat. So we went through the entire story path. This is how it went down. And of course, if you're interested in seeing these, just check my every other State of the Dungeon address where I cover this particular story path. There are copious spoilers throughout. The entire adventure is basically played out by us. The Game Master did customize a good deal of the world, kind of tailoring it to our characters, adding in some of his own elements, so it's not 100% like the book, but many of the elements are going to follow the book. So if you are interested in playing the game yourself, maybe not look too hard into it. But while we played this game, we opened the adventure in the Temple of Tiamat in the Well of Dragons they had constructed. The temple itself was made out of igneous flowstone, basically, that had risen up into a 5-spired temple. And the ritual to summon Tiamat had already started. In the central spire of this temple, Severin, the head of this splinter of the dragon cult, was already levitated all the way up to the top of his tower. He was wearing the mask of the Dragon Queen. This was a problem because they needed that. Also, in each of the 5 towers that rose into the air and arced up to meet the center, although they were not one solid chamber, each one had its own tip. Each of the 5 wizards, the red-robed wizards of Thay, who the dragon cult had basically hired, bribed. Maybe they themselves were members of the dragon cult. It's kind of hard to say, honestly, but we didn't really care. They were just targets. Each one of them had risen up into their own spire and were doing their part of the ritual. We were told that they had to be stopped if we were going to shut down the ritual. Or we had to get the Mask of the Dragon Queen off the plane or destroy it. Okay. Now, the Mask of the Dragon Queen was incomplete as of this start of the session. Severin didn't have the white dragon mask because the Zentarum had tweaked their nose and had taken it out from under their feet. We had it because the Lord's Alliance had negotiated with the Zentarum to give them some legitimacy, and in response they gave us the white dragon mask, which didn't have any meaning to them, so they used it as a political chip, which they got. So we had the white mask, which is fun. He had the black. No, he didn't. He had the blue, the green, and the red. The black we had already sent to the treasure hoard of Bahamut, so it wasn't likely they were going to get a hold of that. And in fact, we had assurances that Bahamut was able to destroy it, so they weren't going to be able to do their full ritual, which would have cemented Tiamat in a place on our world permanently, which would have been ruinous to everything. Instead, he was just going to try to summon her for a delightfully destructive romp through our forces, which we didn't want to see. Although she could have probably been ultimately defeated, but yeah, would have probably meant our characters' deaths, strong as we are. Now, when we opened this, we had just gotten finished taking on an adult blue dragon and the blue dragon worm speaker, whose name was Galvan. Now, Galvan, we didn't have any personal things with him. We didn't really encounter him. I think one of the strengths, the way that it was run, was that several of the Dragon Worm speakers we had a personal thing with. When we took on Resmer, the Black Dragon Worm speaker, it was personal. She had attacked Phandalin. So when we took her on, there was a fair amount of satisfaction in that. When we challenged the Green Dragon Worm speaker, we saw the death and destruction that he had caused to good folk. And so that was something personal when we went after him. Later found out that, again, spoilers, but he was actually a double agent. He was forced to kind of do some of these horrible acts for the greater good of being able to stop the dragon cult in the end, which we did. As a matter of fact, we trusted him, Naren Van. He got us into the temple without any great incident, not having to use up any of our resources, and he himself took out the Red Wizard of Thay, who was up in the Red Temple. Or at least he went to attack him. We never did find out how that worked out. And as a matter of fact, that was a loose end. We never found out how he got out. So, we don't know. But I'm sure it all worked out in the end. Obviously, our characters have the resources. We could raise him from the dead if he had died. And of course, we captured Verum the White Worm Speaker. He was pitiful. We didn't have much of a difficulty with him. That was more of a sidebar than anything. And of course, Severin. Severin, of course, the mastermind of all of this, and we were following in his trail. He was the linchpin. If we beat him, we win. Sort of. So the ritual had been going on. At this point, we had defeated the Blue, and we had summoned Myth, the blood of Tiamat, an ancient copper dragon, he was there to help us against that Blue, but there really wasn't much there to help. We mopped him up very quickly, again, thanks to the hammersmithing of Glint, primarily. I was very disappointed in my own spellcasting effectiveness, unfortunately. But I was looking forward to getting a rebound against Severin. Being an abjurer, I was confident on the outcome. Yeah. Anywho, so I was starting to levitate up, but Myth started climbing up the tower to get at Severin, so I just jumped on Myth and rode him up. It seemed to make a lot of sense at the time. And knowing he had the dragon masks and something of what they did, I didn't waste any time throwing fireballs up, which would have barely hurt him with the mask he had, or anything of that nature. Just decided to go up with Myth to, have a look-see at what, we could possibly accomplish. And as we went up, he did not seem to be overly worried that we had an ancient copper dragon in his temple, and he was facing me. Okay, bit of a knock against me. Not really scaring him. Fine. The others were coming up on their own pace, but they couldn't match the speed that Myth had. Severin threw down a force cage, not around Myth, as I kind of expected, but in front of us, which was weird. We had to kind of work around it, but it really wasn't an impediment. So in response, I just teleported Myth and myself right up next to him, just to get into a bit of fun melee. Well, it really would have worked out well. The others were starting to come up on their own terms, but he came up and had his attention broken. So he stopped levitating. He started falling, especially after we hit him. Myth hit him through the bars of his force cage with his breath weapon, which he weathered. He's not gotten just the hit points of a wizard, I'll tell you that. He's much tougher thanks to the favor of Tiamat. So we were gearing up to try to do what we could against him. I was mostly staving everything in reserve, waiting to cancel his inevitable spell barrage, because he's a wizard, and doing my abjurer level best to stop him. The others, again, woefully inadequate in missile weapons, so they're trying to get up to help out. Although, seeing kind of the dangers of bottlenecking, Trudovic went up after one of the wizards instead to try to assassinate him, which is fine. Eventually, though, Severin lost his concentration and he stopped levitating. He dropped. And we pursued him. Eventually, he went all the way down to the ground where we all just kind of licked our chops. Then he cast a maze on my character, which even through my character's very high intelligence and having skill in intelligence saving throws and having the lucky feat, I couldn't roll anything more than a 4. So I was taken out of the fight for a round, just gone. Thank you, Severin, jerk. Having built everything around being able to weather that moment and not happening just takes the wind out of your sails. Well. The others got to start tagging him. Lydia ripped into him with her sword. Kytheon tried. He tried. His luck wasn't with him either. His spellcasting was far more on point. And unfortunately, for this final session, we did not have Glint. Glint would have probably made this laughably easy, because I can only imagine what damage he would have wreaked upon Severin. Although Severin was not a dragon, so he wouldn't have gotten all the bonuses with his dragon hammer, but still he's a very strong combatant. So we took a fair amount of damage from Severin's shenanigans, but again, I was out of the fight. He had done some damage to the rest of the party with his magics, but he couldn't take everything. And unfortunately, Myth was not able to really land on Severin either when we went down to go get him. So, it was a much longer fight than it probably should have been if we could have just arranged for everybody to get up and start tearing in on him right away. He managed to stretch out the fight a little bit. He screamed out to his dragon outside, the chosen of Tiamat, that it was time. So he came over to the tower and started ripping the ceiling off of the tower, which rained down debris on us. Yeah. And he started coming in. Now, again, he is much bigger than even an ancient red dragon usually is. He was over 150 feet long. Terrifying. We were pretty terrified of him. I was terrified of him. That frightening effect that dragon fright is no joke. However, since Severin lost his concentration, I was back in the fight. And seeing how everybody was going to polish off Severin unless he had something tricky, and reserving my counter spell, I was able to counter one of his spells. But he was going to cast his 6th level spell, and I stopped that. So that felt at least a little good. But when the dragon started coming down, I'm like, nope, Force Cage. And I used my Scroll of Force Cage and stopped him for a moment. Now, Myth was not reassured that that was going to stop him. He's like, it wouldn't have stopped me. I don't think it's going to stop him. But it bought us a little bit of time so that we didn't have to worry about him while we finished off Severin. And we did. Severin finally couldn't take the damage that we were dealing out, and he finally met his end at a combined flurry of all of our attacks. The red dragon vanished. He dimension doored effectively outside of the tower. We thought this couldn't be good. He could come in from any point. It was clear that he was able to destroy walls of the tower in order to get at us. So we were prepared to have to face this huge thing. I felt a bit better about it, knowing that we had Myth there. Myth, as an ancient dragon, should have been at least something to slow him down. With the rest of our abilities, even if we didn't have the services of the dragon hammer, should have been able to do something. That wasn't their plan. The great red dragon sacrificed himself, exploding messily to further power the ritual to bring Tiamat into the world. This was a problem because we knew that all of the red wizards had to go down in order to completely end the spell, and they were all up in separate towers. We could try to get up there as quickly as we could, and we did. We started racing to get up, but to kill the red wizards off, it was, it would have been a bit of a challenge. Tridovic was doing well against his and finished off his red wizard. We don't know how the battle in the red tower went. We hoped that if the guy was worthy of the title of a Green Dragon Worm Speaker as something of an actual nemesis in charge of dragons, he should be able to take out some scabby red wizard who might not expect him to be shish kebabbing him. I don't know. But in the end, it just didn't matter. I took the Mask of the Dragon Queen off of Severin, and under advisement from the wisest member of our group, Kytheon, because I was spoiling for the fight, I took the mask and I stuck it in a bag of holding, which took it off of the plane. It puts it in its own little pocket demi-plane. Since it was no longer on the plane, the ritual couldn't focus through it anymore. The tower immediately started to crumble around us. We got out, the red wizards were crushed under the rubble and died. The ritual was over. A little anticlimactic, actually, but it was a satisfying enough ending that we had slammed the door shut on Tiamat. At the time, before I stuffed the mask in the bag, which, yes, I could have done it a round or two earlier and taken away the drama, but the actual floor was starting to roil, and you can almost see it becoming a portal, and the 5 dragon heads forming as the blood of her dragon prophet was raining down on everything. It was kind of surreal. But the door was slammed shut. Gone. No worries anymore. So now that Severin's dead, the ritual is over, Tiamat can't come anymore, and the big dragon is dead. If you think about it, it might have been a good thing we didn't kill off Severin so quickly, because the red dragon sacrificed himself in a desperate attempt, knowing that we were in danger of ending the ritual, ended his own life to try to force the ritual through. His life force gave a big boost to the ritual, which moved it up quite a bit in its timeline, which meant we had very little time. So, he killed himself, which meant we kind of killed him incidentally, which was cool. But, yeah, we won. That's how it went. And also with them gone, the air elemental that was in charge of blowing the Drakenhorn non-stop stopped, which meant the chromatic dragons weren't really as compelled to stick around anymore. I tried to teleport into the room with the Drakenhorn to make sure that it wasn't going to sound anymore, and screwed that up. Teleports are weird. So we appeared outside of the mountain instead. Not too far off, just on the other side of the mountain wall, actually. And we observed the wrap-up of the battle. We could have charged forward and participated a little bit, but quite honestly, once we stopped that spell and the big looming cloud of doom over the volcano that the Well of Dragons is built in was gone, there really wasn't much to do. The dragons were sorting themselves out, and the metallic dragons were winning. The chromatics had pinned their hope on having Tiamat show up and wipe them out, and that didn't happen. So, nope, our dragon buddies won that battle, and down below, cultists, when they're fanatical, can be nasty opponents. They charge forward heedless of the odds. They attack with berserk fury. Many of them have special little gifts and powers and things that make them a little nastier than your average rank-and-file soldier. Take away their motivation, and again, they saw that the ritual broke up too. They saw Tiamat wasn't coming to help them, and now they're facing a very angry mob of people who have had to put up with their crap for years of their raiding and plundering, and were looking to end it. They didn't stand a chance. The battle was over. Again, there was a fair bit of fighting, but it probably in the end amounted to butchery before they surrendered, and there's going to be a lot of hanging going on. But ultimately, the battle was ours. We met up with Laeral Silverhand. She was very happy with us. We offered what support we could, but really, again, wasn't much necessary. We were able to leave from that point on to pretty much wherever we wanted to go. We still were hanging around with Myth. Myth was with us every bit as much, but he didn't really have to tip his hand as being anything more than an ancient copper dragon. Not that there's anything wrong with being an ancient copper dragon, mind you. But as the most personable dragon that we'd ever encountered, it was kind of cool hanging out with him. Even despite the fact that he's about as close to an avatar of Bahamut as we'd ever likely encounter. And we decided that the next step was definitely we needed to have a party. Now, a group that had more in-depth characters, and if we'd had all kinds of ties going into the world, oftentimes this kind of a party would have been a review of all the things we would have done, bringing in all these disparate characters from all over our travels, people that we've saved, people that we've influenced, people that we've met, the conquering heroes, having this great party. Unfortunately, our group really didn't do that as much. We were pretty much single-mindedly driven through going tromping through the adventure. And while some of us certainly had ties and feelings for some of these people, a lot of us didn't because of just the nature of the characters being more insular and not forming attachments very easily. So as a result, the entire thing was handled rather perfunctorily. There wasn't a lot of role-playing involved. We just had a great time. So that was certainly kind of cool. The denouement of the whole thing was also wrapped up inside of an hour. Again, with many of the player characters not having great roots, it basically boiled down to, well, we're still heroes, so we're going to keep adventuring. So they were written, okay, you continue adventuring. There's not much else there. If you don't have any kind of roots or grounding or anything else like that, that's basically what you could do. My character became a noble in Waterdeep, using his mind and his various skills that he learned, but he eventually practically fell out of wizarding altogether, instead choosing to focus on his roles in the Brewers Guild and the Alchemist Guild, combining those two things. His capstone achievement, which saddened me because it's kind of cheap, is an ale-flavored healing potion. Okay. But he will definitely, almost certainly, be showing up in future adventures of mine, because I have a feeling we'll be back in the Forgotten Realms, and having a really good working knowledge of the mind of one of the nobles, who is generally the smartest person in the room, once he gets smartened up to the way the politics work, and as a dwarf who effectively stopped aging. Yes, that's right, that little thing with myth, all the characters that were involved in the storyline, basically their dragon bloodline of having shared this experience with myth, basically effectively made them immortal hero godlings. Not, really divinely powered, but although they could get extraordinarily powerful in their own right, they weren't going to age, and they would have to, die from less than natural events, which is fine. But yeah, my character ended up, enjoying himself, working to create social clubs that would draw together the different cultures and races throughout the Sword Coast, cementing him as an important figure going forward in the affairs of the Sword Coast, and possibly, making him a patron and everything. Also tied in with the Lord Alliance, which isn't bad. There's worse groups that you could have as people who are actually in power. And a close ally of Laeral, Silverhand, and still keeping his ties with the dwarven peoples of the spine of the World Mountains. So, he ended out pretty well. Kytheon, of course, as a noble himself, through his lineage, did quite well for himself. He would build a temple and be very influential. But again, we really didn't explore a lot of those other bonds and flaws outside of the quest. So, as a result, Lydia, Tredovic, unfortunately Glint, who might certainly have had a very interesting storyline, wasn't there because the players had to bow out of the group due to work-related concerns. So, that story was not firmly written. Although I do think, with his drive and his skills, Glint would have returned home as a hero, bringing the dragon hammer that he was supposed to do. And, of course, saving the world. That doesn't hurt either. And I think he would have done all right for himself. Certainly, he would have kept close ties with the rest of us, so having the services and advice of a powerful wizard and a powerful priest, he would have done just peachy. Probably ended up as a Thane himself. Hopefully maturing quite a bit. But, yeah. I think he had the strength of character to do that. Never really questioned his drive. He was single-minded, sometimes to the point of detriment, but still. Lydia and Tredovic vanished off into history as adventurers. Tredovic went back to the Well of Dragons. He found the lost notes of Samaster, one of the founders of the Cult of the Dragon, and all kinds of shenanigans ensued there. But he became kind of your wandering, itinerant adventurer hero, a bit more substantial than Volo, but going after lost relics and tombs and such, Indiana Jones style, which is kind of cool. And Lydia became a hero of her people. She founded her own halfling city, and maintained a fair amount of influence again. But again, basically she went out as an adventurer. So, and that was the story. I think that Galhard probably ended up pretty well. He would have taken place in the major fighting outside, so he probably came back with new scars and all kinds of glory as a hero of Phandalin and a player in the storyline. I think he would have ended up really well. Although I don't think he ever would have gone back to his tribe. I think he would have just continued to enjoy being an exemplar of the Grand Order. And I think he would have eventually gotten to be pretty happy with that, all things considered. I believe Trudovic ended up becoming, or no, I believe that Kythian ended up becoming the guildmaster for the Grand Order, which is pretty cool. It's a nice capstone on everything that the former guildmaster was a cleric of Lathander, and certainly would have had an eye towards using the Grand Order for good purposes. Now had somebody following the Triad who would have used it for serving out justice and protecting the weak, which is also very cool. Keeps the character of the Grand Order together nicely, I think. So all told, that's it for the storyline. As far as my take on it, I think the adventure itself is very interesting. It's very linear. If anybody is running this story, I strongly suggest defanging the seeming time limit that's hanging over the group's head and allowing a lot of side quests. Let the game flesh out a bit more. It felt a bit rushed, honestly, even though it took over a year and a half. It covered 3 books. I really enjoyed playing my character, but I would have loved to have played him longer and in more meaningful things to make our characters tied into the world, make those battles more significant on a character level, rather than just, okay, we're fighting another white dragon. Granted, the hats off to the DM. You did a great job, sir, in making that world come to life. I wish that we had had the luxury of more people buying into your world and building that investment and building a richer, more connected world. But you play the hand you're dealt, right? So the campaign itself, though, as I said, if you're looking for one of those save the world kind of storylines, it's not bad. The end of it leaves you not at the maximum level of 20th, which is fine. Had we gone all the way up and kept adventuring on until we hit 20th level, that probably would have taken about 3 years worth of adventuring to do, depending on how things went. We went with a milestone system, so we got levels according to hitting certain benchmarks. I honestly think that's the way to go with 5th edition, but if you use experience, that's fine. I'm sure it all would have worked out pretty well. As far as the writing was excellent, and again, the Game Master put through everything just fine. It was quite good. I think as far as using dragons as recurring enemies, especially if they're not in their lairs and things like that, that's a little bit of a disservice to one of the coolest monsters in Dungeons & Dragons when they become a stock enemy. But it always made the fights interesting, that's for sure. And I definitely was kept on my toes, despite the fact that my character probably came off as brash and cocky. As an Abjurer, he was pretty confident he could shut down any spellcaster, even when that wasn't the case. C being put in a maze in the final battle. But and also next time I'm not going to be playing an Abjure, that's for sure, because I always felt like I was on my heels the whole time. I was always ready to deal with something rather than proactively doing something. So I definitely next time I want to play a spellcaster, I want to do something more proactive. But I am going to miss my characters. I am going to miss Galhard a bit, although Galhard won't be hard to recreate. He was fun, he was exotic for me, he had an interesting personality, and I think I did a pretty good job with him. But as far as Corbrecht goes, Corbrecht, to me, is the way I've always wanted to play a wizard. Competent, cool, strong-headed, with a good concrete goal and a will to get there. And I did. I hit all of the goals for Corbrecht as I went. As far as, working and synergizing with the rest of the party, I think we left a lot on the table. I think there were a lot of circumstances we could have learned better from, and it did leave the final battle in a bit more doubt than it probably should have for all the advantages we had going into it. But it just made it more thrilling, I guess, in the end. But yeah, that's how it went, and that is the end of the Tyranny of Dragons storyline. So hopefully you've enjoyed running through it with me. Now, unfortunately, after this point, we have nothing else looking forward at the time being, so this group is at the moment going to be vacated. So you're going to only have my State of the Dungeon sessions every other week with this particular group. However, as I am looking forward to the quarantine ending and maybe getting in touch with some of the former players, I'm going to be doing States of the Dungeon for other games that I run. So hopefully you won't have to be too long bereft without me regaling you with the adventures that I have in mind. So, until that next time, adventurers, thank you very much for joining me, and I am Rob. I will see you next time I crawl down here into the dungeon and make a video. Thank you. Farewell.